Hello. Over here. I am just down by the wall, do not mind me. I slip out to the garden most nights, once the lamps are seen to and the fire is banked and the library can be trusted to look after itself for a while. It can, you know. It has had the practice. Come and walk with me a moment, if you would like to. Look at it all. The flowers keep their own light out here after dark. The tall ones along the wall, the ones down by the water, even the small pale ones underfoot that you would step straight over by day. Nobody lit them. They simply do this, once the sun is well gone. There is a reason for it, but it is far nicer just to look. I like it best down at this end, where the beds have gone a little wild. It puts me in mind of a garden I knew of once, and of the woman who kept it, and of the small, strange kindness that found its way to her there. Shall I tell you as we go? Or we can sit. The stone bench holds the day's warmth a good while yet. Make yourself comfortable. It is a gentle one, this. About tending a garden, about patience, about a kind of love that does not make a fuss of itself. But I will not get ahead of it. Here. Let me start. There was a garden at the edge of a small town, in the crook of a lane that most people only ever took by mistake, and a woman named Penny kept it. It was not a grand garden. It had no fountains, no clipped hedges cut into the shapes of birds, nothing you would cross a county to see. It was the other sort, roses gone leggy and generous over the porch, foxgloves leaning wherever they pleased, beans climbing their poles, and sweet peas climbing the beans, because Penny had never quite had the heart to tell them apart, a pear tree older than the house, and bees. A great many bees, working the whole of it from first light, so that the garden hummed to itself all through the warm days, as a kettle does just before it sings. Penny was up early every morning, before the town, before the birds had settled who was singing what. She loved the garden best at that hour, cool and grey and still, the dew heavy enough to soak her shoes through in the first minute, and her not minding it at all. She had her round, the same round every morning, though she could not have drawn it for you on paper. Past the roses first, to see who had opened in the night. Then along the wall, where the stone held the warmth and the earliest bees were already out and grumbling. Down to the far beds, the ones that had gone a little wild, which were her favourites, though she would not have said so out loud in front of the tidy ones. She pulled a weed here and left one there, having decided long ago that a garden kept too clean is a garden with nowhere for anything to live. She pinched the dead heads off the marigolds so the plants would keep making more, which is the whole quiet bargain of a marigold. She tied up what had fallen in the night. And she talked to the plants, only a little, and only the sort of thing you would say to anyone you were fond of and not worried about impressing. It had not always looked like this. Not long before, the rain had forgotten them for a while. The sky had gone hard and blue and cloudless morning after morning, and the ground had turned pale and drawn back from itself in little cracks. The beans had come up thin and half-hearted. The roses gave fewer flowers than she could ever remember. The foxgloves drooped where they stood, and even the far wild beds, the ones that usually needed no help from anyone, had gone quiet and dull and tired-looking. Everything in the garden had simply had a harder time of it, and there was not much Penny could do except keep going. So she did. She watered what she could, carried it by hand when the water was running short, 2 cans at a time, one for each hand, the length of the garden and up the little slope to the beds that needed it most. The handles bit into her fingers, and the cans knocked against her shins and slopped cold water down into her shoes. And she went back and did it again. She did it before dawn, and again after dusk, the 2 coolest hours of the day, because water given to a garden under a hot sun is half of it gone to steam before it ever reaches a root, and she had known that her whole life. She did not make a fuss of it. She simply kept showing up morning and evening, doing the small things that could be done and trusting the garden to do the rest when it was ready. The dry spell broke in the end. They always do. The rain came back one soft grey afternoon, quietly, almost shyly, as though it were a little sorry to have stayed away so long. And the garden drank it all and came back to itself, slowly at first, and then all at once, the way tired things do when they have been looked after long enough to remember what they are. The beans thickened on their poles. The roses opened again. The far beds went back to being froth and lean and lolling and wonderful, thick with bees, as though nothing had ever troubled them at all. And it was not long after that, with the garden lush and dripping and forgiven, that the first strange kindness found its way to Penny's gatepost. It was sitting there one grey early morning where she could not have walked past it. A piece of honeycomb, a neat golden slab of it, small enough to sit in her palm, the little cells all filled and capped and perfect, beaded over with the morning damp. It smelled of the whole of the warm season at once. It smelled, faintly, of her own garden, of the lavender and the clover and the flowers on the far wild beds. Penny stood at the gate and turned it over in her hands, and could not for the life of her think who had left it. She thought it must be a neighbour. It was the sort of thing neighbours did in that lane, leaving a marrow or a bunch of rhubarb on a step and slipping off before they could be thanked. So she went along the lane that afternoon and thanked them all, more or less at once, in the vague way you do when you are not certain which of them it was. And every single one of them said it was not them, and looked rather pleased to be suspected of such a nice thing, and said they only wished it had been. So that was that, she thought. A kindness with no name on it. She kept the comb on her kitchen window-sill, and had a little of it in her tea, and it was, without any argument at all, the best honey she had ever tasted. And a few mornings later, there was another. Now, there had been, for a while, a bee. Penny could not have told you when it started. The garden was full of bees, of course. Hundreds of them, thousands, through all the warm days. And she loved them as you love weather, in general, and without needing to know one from the next. But there was one that was different, one that seemed to be, of all unlikely things, hers. It was a small bee, a little dark, a little worn at the wings, nothing much to look at among all the fat, bright ones bumbling in the lavender. But wherever she was in the garden, it was near her, on the brim of her hat, on the back of her wrist while she worked, on the handle of the trowel, riding along as she carried it from bed to bed, holding on like a small dozy passenger with nowhere better in the world to be. It never stung her. It never seemed to want a thing from her. It only kept close, the whole day through, and went home to the hive at dusk with all the rest, and was back on the brim of her hat the next morning before she had finished her tea. She got used to it. Then she got fond of it, which is a different thing and takes a little longer. She would hold out a finger, and it would step onto it, unhurried, and she would carry it that way to the next job, like a small friend she was showing round the place. "Good morning," she would tell it. "Kept you busy, have they?" It never answered, being a bee, but it always came. And after a while she stopped thinking of it as one of the garden's bees at all, and started thinking of it as simply the bee. Hers. The one that stayed. The days went on as good days do, which is to say quietly and much alike, and Penny would not have changed one thing about them. In the morning she watered, before the sun climbed the wall and turned the watering to a waste. There is a smell that comes off dry ground when the first water hits it, something warm and dark and green all at once. And it was, Penny thought privately, one of the very best smells there is. Better than the roses, though she would never have hurt the roses' feelings by saying so. By the middle of the day, the garden was loud with working. the whole warm air of it thick and droning and content. She would sit on the step in the shade with a slice of bread and a scrape of the good honey, the honey with no name on it, and the bee would sit on the rim of her cup, and the two of them would take their lunch together and say nothing at all, which is the best kind of company to keep at the loudest part of a hot day. In the long gold of the afternoon she did the slow jobs, the ones that cannot be hurried and are the better for it, tying the tall things to their stakes before the wind could have them, easing a root free of a stone, sitting back on her heels now and then to look at nothing in particular, which any gardener will tell you is a proper part of the work and not a rest from it. And in the cool of the evening, as the light went thin and the garden began to fold itself up for the night, the bees would leave off and go home, streaming back to the hives at the bottom of the garden in ones and twos, and then in a hurrying crowd, until the humming thinned right out and the garden went quiet. All but her bee, which liked to stay on her shoulder until the very last of the light, and only then lift off and follow the others home, as though it did not much care to be the one to call the day done. The honey kept coming, on the gate-post, on the window-sill, once in the low fork of the pear tree, where she had to stand on the box to reach it. She stopped asking after it. She had the sense, without quite letting herself think it plainly, that asking too hard might be a sort of rudeness, that it might spoil a thing which was only kind for as long as it stayed quiet. Once, mind, she did try to catch them at it. She got up in the dark, earlier than early, and sat at the kitchen window with a blanket round her and watched the gate through the grey. But a garden gives nothing away to a person determined to catch it. She watched the dark go blue, and the blue go pale, and the first bees come out to the wall, and somewhere in there, warm under the blanket with the whole quiet garden breathing in front of her, she fell asleep in the chair, as one does. And when she woke, there was a fresh comb of honey on the sill, not a foot from her head, and the bee sitting on top of it, cleaning its face with its front legs for all the world as though it had been waiting for her to wake up and see. It was another of those grey early mornings when she finally did see. She had not meant to. She came round the corner of the porch quiet in her bare feet, with the sky still the colour of a moth's wing and the garden not yet decided about the day, and she stopped. The garden was full of bees, not working, not yet. It was too early and too cool for that. They were simply out, hundreds of them, drifting low and slow over the beds in the half-light, unhurried, as though they too had woken early and come out to see what sort of morning it was going to be. And along the top of the wall, in a line, a handful of them were carrying something, working at it together, the way ants will carry a crumb far too big for any one of them. A small comb of honey, pale gold, moving in little starts and stops along the stone, towards the gate-post, towards the flat place where she would find it, where she always found it. At the head of it, leading, or perhaps only keeping it company, was one small bee. A little dark, a little worn at the wings. Penny did not move. She hardly breathed. She stood in the wet grass in the moth-grey light, and watched the bees of her garden carry their small gift the length of the wall and set it down, careful as anything, exactly where she would see it, and then lift away and drift back down to the hives, their morning errand done, all but the one which came the long way round the garden to her and settled on the back of her hand and sat there. And Penny understood it then, all at once, and without a single word being said, the way the truest things are always understood. They had been giving it to her, all this time, for the leggy roses and the foxgloves left to lean where they liked, for the weeds she let live, so there would be somewhere for the small things to be, for the wild beds she loved best and kept half for their own sake, for the water carried up the slope, can after can, in the grey and the blue, when the whole garden was tired and she was the only one who kept showing up, For a garden tended not tidy but kind, not grand but generous. A garden made, first and last, to be a good place to be a bee in. They had noticed. That was the whole of it. They had noticed, and this was them saying so, in the only sweetness they had to say it with. She went in after a while, when the cold of the grass had climbed past her ankles and the first real light was coming over the wall. She cut a slice of bread and spread it thick with the gift from the gatepost, and she sat on the step to eat it, and the small worn bee sat on the rim of her cup. The two of them at breakfast together as they took their lunch together, saying nothing, which was still the best kind of company either of them knew. She kept the garden just the same after that. She had thought about it, and decided there was nothing to change, since the whole point of the thing was that she had never once been doing it for the thanks. The roses stayed leggy, the far beds stayed wild, the weeds she liked kept their places, and the honey kept coming quietly, left where she would find it. And her bee kept close through all of it, on the brim of her hat, on the back of her wrist, on the handle of the trowel, riding along from bed to bed like a small dozy passenger with nowhere in the world it would rather be. Each of them tending the other, neither of them making the smallest fuss of it. Honey and the bee that stayed. There, that is where I always leave her, with the bread and the bee and the whole long day still ahead of her. It is a small story, I know. Most of the best ones are. They do not need to be large. They only need to be true in the places that matter, and that one is. The flowers are still at it, look, all down the length of the wall. They have their reasons. Go on in if you have gone cold. The fire will have kept. The good chair is nearest it, and it will be warm, because things stay warm in that room far longer than you would think, and I have long since stopped asking why. Rest now. Let the day go. All at once, without watching for it. I will see the garden to bed, and the fire after it, and then I will sit up a while, the way I like to. Sleep well. Good night.